Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host David Holloway, and once again it's great to be here with you. Ray Manzarek is pretty well recognised as one of rock music's keyboard pioneers with the Doors. Sadly, due to Ray's death in 2013, there'll never be the opportunity to speak with him, but I'm really pleased to speak instead with Sandy soon. Sandy is an Australia-based keyboard player who, aside from playing both bass and keyboards in cover band The Brazen Liars, also covers keyboards Manzarek style in the Doors tribute band Unlocking the Doors. As you'll hear, Sandy provides some great insight into gigging, covering the Doors and much more. A quick apology too, you'll hear me mangle Ray Manzarek's name early in the interview. I soon learnt from my guest the right way to say it. Anyhow, enjoy the interview. Hi Sandy, thanks for joining us, particularly on a Sunday morning. That's a big call for any gigging musician.
Good morning, Dave. It's lovely to be here. It's great to chat with you again.
Yeah, look, even I'm struggling on a Sunday morning, so I really appreciate you doing it. Did you have a gig this weekend?
No, we actually had a
good.
weekend off.
There you
So
go.
it's a good chance to go out and catch some other musicians, which is always valuable.
Yeah, and I know it's unusual for you to have a weekend off because I know between sort of the two key bands you're in that you're rather busy. So, I mean, a disclosure to our listeners, Sandy and I I've had the pleasure of meeting Sandy walk a whole bunch of times, and we've even played, shared the same gigs, including on a cruise boat on Sydney Harbour, which was a great day. So,
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So,
yeah, it was
so
a good day.
we've known each other for a while,
Yeah.
and in Wollongong, a lot of us musos know each other very well.
Yes.
And it's a pleasure to come and have a chat and just talk about keyboards and our respective experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've played together before, but I'm involved in three bands, two main ones, as you mentioned before. Unlocking the Doors tribute band, which keeps us very busy. We only play locally probably one or two times a year at the most. Yeah, and spend a lot of time touring around because it's not. I think it's a great show, but after people have seen it two or three times, sometimes they don't need to see it again for a little while after that.
And actually, that's a really good point you raise there, and we'll probably talk about that down the track as well as, just how serious some of your fans are. And I imagine it's like any tribute act, you've got your 10% of people that are the true, absolutely devoted fans that will come back time after time. And then, as you said, people go, I'm going to go and get a dose of this, and then I'll be right for another year or two.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Definitely a lot of hardcore Doors fans out there, and they emerge at the gigs from time to time, and they can be very picky, and it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes to make sure the shows are entertaining for as many people as possible. Yet we pay respect to the Doors, and that we're close enough that it keeps the dinky die hard Doors fans happy as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's obviously the reason I asked you to come on, not just because we know each other, but because of Unlocking the Doors. And obviously Ray Manzarek, as I've just mentioned in the intro, is one of the icons and pioneers of rock keyboards. It's hard to go past him, particularly how individual his style was. So, I mean, we might as well jump straight into that. How much of a challenge was that? Well, actually, a step back further, what made you, in partnership with the other people in the band, decide to do the Doors? What brought Unlocking the Doors about?
Oh, that's an interesting question, Dave. Prior to Unlocking the Doors, I was involved, I am, and I still am, in a covers band, Brazen Liars, with my partner Mick on guitar and vocals, and our good mate Rich on the drums. Rich is an absolute Doors aficionado, obsessive Doors aficionado, and after our Brazen Liars shows, we used to come home and have a couple of drinks, and it'd be a race to the record player put on vinyl. And if Rich won, it'd be a Doors album for sure. So we spent a lot of time listening to the Doors and having a few drinks late at night after shows. Um, then Ray Manzarek passed away a few years ago, sadly, and we decided we would try and recreate a Doors track. It never occurred to us that we could do that, being a three-piece, and the fact that it's quite daunting to be able to play the bass and the organ at the same time. But we gave it a crack, it worked, and we thought, hey, this sounds like a good idea. So we got a drummer on board, and Rich did all the singing, and Unlocking the Doors was born.
So there you
So
go. Yeah, that's it.
yeah,
And for you, and I was going to delve into this, and we may do it now as a sideline. So you have some formal training. Am I correct in as far as piano?
absolutely,
Yeah.
quite a bit. I grew up in Western Australia in a Chinese Australian family, and even though my parents are quite Aussie and embrace the Aussie lifestyle, all all three kids were put through piano lessons at a very young age,
Yeah.
classical piano lessons, and I managed to stick it out until I left high school. So the usual round of AMEB
Yeah.
exams and Eisteddfods, and I was okay. I wasn't fantastic, but that gave me a really good grounding for the sort of work I'm doing now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
And because with Ray's playing, and I'm embarrassed to say I haven't looked deep into his background, but I don't know whether he had formal training. But did you find that helped you as far as picking up his style, or
uh, Well, the two-handed thing,
yeah,
which is two hands doing different things, to me came a lot more naturally.
yeah,
So I can play the bass lines with my left hand, and play organ over the top of it without being too daunted. Um, it took a little bit of practice. When the Doors were formed, they did audition some bass players to be a part of their
okay,
band. Yeah, but they weren't happy with any of them. So Ray decided to play the bass lines with his left hand, and he managed to acquire a Fender Rhodes bass piano,
oh yeah,
and they were happy with that sound as a live sound. Interestingly, in a lot of their albums, they do use bass players,
right.
particularly late in some of their later albums. But live, he always played the bass lines on a Fender Rhodes bass.
There you go. Because I was going to ask, yeah, exactly how he did the sound. Okay, that's really interesting. And so, when you were faced with, okay, let's put Unlocking the Doors together. How do you approach repertoire? As far as I'm sure you do vary it up, and I know you did a tour last year. Recognising the anniversary of
Of the Soft Parade,
Soft
yeah,
Parade
yeah.
album. So how do you go about arranging your repertoire, and how extensive, like how many songs have you basically learnt from the Doors that you use on an ongoing basis?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure the exact number, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
So our shows are generally 2 to 2.5 hours long.
Wow.
So to fit in a format that works with a lot of music venues. When the Doors played live, they played one set, and it probably wasn't nearly as long.
Mm.
But they have so many hits. They were a very prolific band. They were quite a young band, and they actually released 8 albums in 5 years.
Wow.
Jim Morrison was a prolific writer. They were all awesome musicians, and they put down 2 studio albums in the first year, and it just snowballed from there. So we try and cover all the big hits, but we always put in a few oddities as well.
Mm.
There's so much good music and so much interesting music. Every show is different, and sometimes people will send us messages requesting certain tracks. We did the Soft Parade anniversary tour, as you mentioned, and the Soft Parade's a bit of departure from the other albums in that it's quite heavily produced and employs a horn section and a lot of strings as well. And so we were lucky enough to be able to get some horn players and string players to tour with us. and play the entire album's entirety, which was
Yeah.
wonderful, um, challenging, but enjoyable, and very lucky that the musicians that came on board were all friends of someone in the band. We got on like a house on fire, had a fantastic time, and managed to pull off something quite unique.
I
Uh,
reckon. And is that something you had to do charts in that, Sandy, or there was stuff available, or these guys were, just able to have a good listen and pick up the parts?
well, we had to do everything from scratch. We couldn't find any charts
Yeah.
for the strings and the horns. We knew most of the songs, and the four of us learnt the songs as we normally
Yeah.
do, but we had to learn them exactly as they were on the album.
Mm.
Without any variation, without any dramatic license, or the solos all had to be the right length, etc.
Yeah.
And the charts were mainly put together by the trumpet player and the strings
Yeah,
players,
cool.
and so they're all very, very competent players,
Yeah.
and we had a couple of rehearsals, and then they killed it on the night.
Yeah.
We did 3 shows, Lizottes, the Vanguard in Newtown, and Basement in Canberra, and it was brilliant. But stressful, so I think we've got a video of a Lizotte show, and I think at this stage we'll only be doing a few songs from Soft Parade, not the album from cover to
Yeah,
cover.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I can't imagine how great it was having the strings and the horns and stuff, but you're right. It's a much bigger beast to lumber along the road when you're doing stuff like that. That's hard work.
Definitely, and we're used to being fairly self-contained. There are 4 people in the band, as there were in the Doors, and we're all friends. We often travel together,
Mm.
and share gear and socialise. I guess in other bands like Pink Floyd band, for instance, there are a lot more personnel required and a lot more gear are required, but we travel reasonably lightly, and it's just the 4 of us, and we're usually all pretty easy to please. We're quite relaxed with where we stay, where we go, how we travel, so that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, God, yeah. So no, look, and obviously our locking the doors still going strong. Got lots of gigs coming up. We'll talk about that
Great.
towards the end. But let's go a little bit back. I mean, you obviously mentioned your formal training. One of the things that stood out for me, both with unlocking the doors and the brazen lies that you've mentioned, is obviously you know how to to rock, and this is a stereotype that I don't believe applies at least 50% of the time. But some people will say if you're a formally trained musician, you can't usually get into that groove or rock it out like someone that is an ear player. And then obviously
Yeah.
there are huge downsides to being an ear player like me that doesn't have a lot of formal training as well. But you obviously, by what I've seen, refute that stereotype anyway. But I mean,
Mm.
has that been your experience? What are your thoughts on that? Because I don't necessarily agree with it. And I said you're an example of why I don't agree with it. But
Oh, look, there's pros and cons of having the classical training. I guess coming from a classical background, it can be very difficult to let go and to groove and to improvise. All those things um, aren't covered in classical training, and
mm,
don't always come naturally. But I was quite fortunate in a lot of ways. When I went to university, I stopped playing music for quite a long time, and really only got back into music when I met my partner
mm,
Mick, probably 14 and 15 years ago. I always listened to music and had a bit of strum on the guitar, but I think playing the guitar as well and picking up the bass guitar really, really helped me
yeah,
get into the groove of rock music. When the Brazen Liars were formed, we actually know Richie from before. Um, uh, with Richie and another friend of ours, Rick, we had an originals band that we played in around the traps
okay,
to small crowds, and we were playing at a local venue one night, and the venue manager came up and said, "Oh, you guys wouldn't mind doing a covers gig, do you? I've had a cancellation." And it was 9 weeks away, and Mick and Rich and I just looked at each other and said, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And then they said, "Oh, guess what, Sandy? You've got 9 weeks to learn the bass guitar."
Yeah.
So, so that was interesting. But knowing music theory and listening to a lot of rock and playing some rock keyboards before was a big bonus. And playing the bass guitar and learning some bass grooves and playing along with drummers, I think without that I wouldn't be able to do what I do today.
Yeah, that's right. And you've prompted me on an issue too about learning the bass. So obviously, I've seen the Brazen Liars play a bunch of times, and you obviously do play actual bass guitar. But there are some songs where you are playing keyboards and cover the keyboard on bass. Now, one of the things that stood out for me is that the sound you're getting through, because as you know, most cover band rock musicians will pick out a non-bass guitar, whether it's a backing track or whatever it is, fairly easily. But I honestly can barely tell the difference when you're playing the bass guitar or when you're doing it on keyboard as far as the quality of the bass. How have you pulled that off with the keyboard?
Well, I have to say I've got a very good tech. My partner Mick is in charge of all things technical with all our bands, and is a complete amp nerd, which is awesome. So what I usually do is I have a little bass head, a little LMK Mark bass head, which has 2 channels. So I run my bass guitar through one channel, and I run the keyboard through the second channel. So they've got separate controls, but we can EQ it to sound very much like a bass guitar.
And without going into, I don't expect you to even remember the name of the sound, but it's sort of what keyboard bass sound are you using?
That's a good question. The Brazen Liars, I play through a Korg PS60.
Yeah.
And I find that the Korg factory defaults are awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
So I've found, and I can't remember the name of the bass sound off the top of my head, but it's an acousticy bass, woody sort of bass sound normally, but run through the amp sounds great. And Mick and I together have programmed a number of patches that I can pick out on the fly. I know you use software when you're doing your shows, but I find with the Brazen Liars that it's very freeform, and I gave up doing set lists years ago because the boys will call out songs. Someone will say, "Oh, can you play AC/DC?" or "Can you play Guns N' Roses?" And they'll go, "Sure." And in an instant, I need to dial up the sounds I need or change instruments.
That's right.
And so my keyboard setup has always been something that's performance friendly and something that I can change on the fly. So on the PS60, there's a whole lot of patches with matching bass patches, and the bass patches aren't the same for every sound.
No.
Like to match with an airy string sound, sometimes it's a more acousticy sounding bass. Where to match with the synth sounds, we usually pair them with a much more synthy sounding bass. So we try to match the sounds and the levels to the songs that we play.
Yeah. And that probably goes across to Unlocking the Doors as well. How did you go? Obviously, a lot of those songs, particularly the hits that some of the more general punters will know, have very iconic sounds. How long did it take you to source the sounds that you were happy with? I mean, obviously, a lot of them were Rhodes, and I don't know whether Ray played B3, but anyway, Hammond or whatever it was. But is that how hard was that to work that stuff up?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of fiddling around to try and replicate the sound. It would have been great to have the vintage instruments, but for a touring band, it's probably not practical. The Fender Rhodes bass, they are some still around. They're on the pricey side and they require some maintenance, but that's the sound of the Doors. As he hits a Fender Rhodes bass, there's that little clunk where the hammer hits the little tines that is replicated in the modern digital instruments, but not exactly the same. So I just use a standard performance keyboard to get the bass. At the moment, I'm using a Roland, a VR09, which is
Oh,
a
yep.
nice, light little
Yeah.
all-rounder. It's got plenty of sounds. So I've got a few patches there for the different bass sounds, and occasionally I use an added organ or piano sound in the treble too in some
Yeah.
songs that require the effects. So I do that for the bass. With the organs, Ray Manzarek had a few different organs. He was touring at a time where most people played B3s,
Yeah.
but they're not that easy to drag around on the road. So he started off with a Vox Continental,
Oh, yep.
which was much lighter, but had that really carnival, high pitch, sort of breathy kind of sound to the keys, and had that character. Had the like reverse coloured keys. They're black keys
Yes.
with black and white were reversed. So that was good for a certain sound, but in the middle of the third album, he changed over to a Gibson Kalamazoo, which is looks a
Okay.
bit like a Farfisa.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, but had a few different sounds and has a little note bender too. So for that time, I guess that was a lot better than what he was used to. And he changed to the Kalamazoo and did go to a B3 for the later albums, but I
Right.
don't believe he toured with them because the last album, or the fifth studio album, LA Woman, was made just before Jim Morrison left for Paris. So
Right.
to the best of my knowledge, that was never performed live.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably would have toured with them. I know. I don't need me to tell you. There's lots of bands out there that would cut Leslie's around for all. Like, I've seen pictures of bands with 3, 4, 5 Leslies on stage.
Oh, yes.
But gee, I can't imagine what a nightmare that was.
Yes, it's wonderful. But interestingly, Ray never used a Leslie, not on stage.
No.
I think he recorded with the Leslie, particularly
Yeah.
later on. But he had the habit of running his keyboards through guitar amps.
Yeah. Gotcha.
To give them a little bit of I guess that ballsy quality and a rock, a sort of
Yeah.
more gritty sound, and I do that as well. It makes a lot of sense as far as ease, and as far as pulling the sound out of the keyboards. Sometimes in practice I'll play through a keyboard amp, but there's such a difference when I
There is. Yeah.
through a guitar amp. And generally on the road, I just get the sound techs to mic up the guitar amps, and get the sound straight out of them. I have them pointing at my head so I can hear the sound directly from the
Yeah.
amps. And that's the best way I've found to try and recreate the sound that Ray got. I didn't mention, yeah, but sorry.
No, you're right. I was going to say, and one of the things I'm jealous of too is I imagine your on stage sound levels are a little bit more sane than a traditional rock covers band. That it would be nice, I'm guessing, to hear the more the intricacies of what's being played, because I mean the Doors can obviously rock out, but I would have thought the venues you're playing, you're not pumping it out at massive volumes.
Exactly. It's only four of us on stage, and no bass guitar on stage. Um, and we're able to keep it to a very manageable level. I think we're quite an easy band to mix. 2 vocals, and 4 instruments essentially.
Yeah.
I think generally mixers are able to pull a good front of house sound pretty easily. Not really any complications. I usually set off a couple of sound effects through my organ.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a dilemma with tribute bands as to how far you go.
So you're talking things like the thunderstorm sounds and things like that for Rise on the Storm, right? There'd be a whole bunch of others. Is it stuff like that? Yeah.
Exactly. Because the Doors live, we're very stripped back. So pretty much one organ sound, no sound effects, and they just would bash out their 8 or 10 songs, and everyone would go wild. But for us, we're not the Doors, and we want to try and recreate what people remember of the Doors and make it a bit of an experience, make it entertaining. So our lead singer, Rich, he pulls a few of the less R-rated antics that Jim Morrison did on stage. He reads a little bit of the poetry in between songs sometimes. Jim Morrison was primarily a poet and a lyricist, and came to singing later, once the Doors was initially created.
Yeah.
Also, I vary my sounds a little bit. I use I've chosen Mick and I have chosen a Hammond SK1 to use as my main organ.
Yeah.
It's got great transistor organ sounds, and the digital Leslie it's got on board is pretty good. We don't use it for a lot of songs, just the later stuff. A couple of the songs from LA Woman.
Yeah.
But it's a great instrument. It's easy to use. The organ sounds are very organic. So what I tend to do is stick to the organ sounds, but I vary it a little bit to pay respect a little bit to how they sounded, how the studio song sounded a little bit, and so that not every sound is sonically exactly the same.
That's right.
And it makes it a little bit, I think, more entertaining and easier to listen to. But we've had a lot of Doors aficionados that have come up and say, well, the Doors didn't use those sounds live, and said, well, yeah, we're aware of that, but
that's that 10% we're talking about.
That's the 10%.
Yeah.
That's right. So, we had one come up to us at a show in Melbourne, and poor Mick. Mick plays guitar in the Doors, and he does a great job. He plays all finger style like Robbie Krieger, and it's quite challenging. He's got to sit in behind the sound of the keys and Jim Morrison. One of these Doors aficionados and came up to said to him, "Oh, well done. I'd say you are 90%." I thought, oh, good. I guess it's a compliment.
Should have asked for a certificate. Can you sign that off, please? Yeah.
Exactly. But that's where that's the way it goes. We can't please everybody. We do our best to create a good experience, and to be as faithful as we can. And the main I feel the main purpose of a tribute band is to keep the music alive.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. The Doors were 50 years ago, and we're getting a lot of youngsters, a lot of 18, 20-year-olds.
Okay, I was going to ask that. So you are getting some younger people there. Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, it's come full cycle, and I've been told that the Doors become quite popular again in the younger surf culture, and we've certainly seen a lot of young'uns, people of all ages, and some of them are moshing down the front and singing every word.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
and
just wonderful.
Speaking of singing every word, what are the songs for you, Sandy, that you enjoy most, and probably also what you think are the most challenging ones? So, I mean, I know you mentioned with Soft Parade, just working with the bigger band was obviously a challenge, but what are the songs that you found most challenging, but you also enjoy playing the most? And there might be ones you absolutely hate, although I don't expect you to admit that one.
You know what, Dave? I'd say every song is challenging with the Doors. Every song. I guess with the iconic ones, we have to get them very, very accurate, and there's not much license to improvise too much. I guess Light My Fire is one of the big ones, with that classic opening riff. But a long solo in the middle as well, a long keyboard solo and guitar solo as well. So I try to stick close to what people have heard on the album version, but when Mick does his solo, we cut loose a little bit and muck around. The Doors were really into John Coltrane, so Mick throws in a little bit of my favourite things, a bit of Hendrix and this and that. We have a little bit of fun in that section, and and it's different every night. And then when Rich comes back on stage, we can bring it back into the song again. So that's always something I look forward to. A little bit stressed to start off with, as always, just to make sure that we nail it. But once we get going, love it. Riders on the Storm is another big one, of course, one of their popular songs. But being from LA Woman, not performed live, as far as I know. We haven't been able to find a live version. And, of course, the iconic Rain track and the little tinkling run down. Even after all these years, I always have to take a big breath before that
you
run.
do that. I was wondering about that because it is. And I mean, you've obviously seen Ray's video where he walks through the recording of that track. It's a brilliant video on YouTube.
Yes.
I watched a few times, but that's a big challenge. Yeah, I can imagine.
It's not that it's difficult.
No, it's just the pressure at the time.
That's right. But plenty of iconic songs. So every now and then we'll throw in something different. I'm just trying to think of what we're doing at the moment. Texas Radio, Wasp from LA Woman. That's quite an interesting sort of grinding bluesy song. Love Street, that's quite a tinkly piano song. Okay. There's a real range of material there, and we try to perform everybody's favourites every time, but throw in a few other oddities from time to time, just to make it interesting and put something out there for the real diehard.
10%.
That 10%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing you. And I mean, outside of the Doors, Sandy, what are the influences, going back to obviously growing up and starting piano lessons right through to now, what are the big influences, whether it's other musicians that you love listening to or even other players that you've gone, yeah, this is something I'd like to do?
When I was growing up, I listened to a lot of 80s Oz rock.
Did we all?
Yeah, so it's all very familiar to me. I didn't really get into the synth 80s as much at the time when I was growing up.
All right, so we might end the interview right there then.
Okay.
No, keep going.
Interestingly, but being in a band with Mick and Rich, Rich is a huge Duran and Bon Jovi fan, so we were always going to play that. Mick is a huge Prince fan, so I couldn't be helped being immersed. And having the keyboard, we're playing a lot of 80s stuff as well, which is actually really fun.
That's right.
Yeah. As far as influences, it's really hard to name any one person. As far as the keyboard goes, there are a lot of great guys going around at the moment that I always watch closely and grab the chance to go out and see in Australia when I can. The Doley brothers, of course, Lachy and Clayton Doley.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, play Hammond, and Clayton's a little bit more bluesy, but fantastic live, real masters of performance.
Yeah, I'd love to see them. And Lachy also does these, I assume he still does these online, I think you and I have spoken about these online organ lessons.
He does.
And because I don't have any formal training, I've debated forking out for that a few times. That is on my bucket list to do his lessons.
Yes, mine too. Yeah. And a lot of the session players going around. I had the honour of playing with Chris Alford as well, who's played with a lot of the 80s bands and pops up a lot at some of our local venues, and is a real boffin as far as gear goes as well, but just a master of sitting in with other musicians and playing what's needed, which is always difficult to pick out in a rock band as a keyboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that probably links to a great question I was going to ask you is, what are some of the challenges outside of unlocking doors, but just as a gigging keyboard player, what are some of the things that you've learned that you would like to pass on to other people, or some of the more interesting anecdotes or challenges you've had at particular gigs?
Just that I'm always learning.
Yeah.
Always. So um, I think less is more.
Yeah.
I think selecting the right sounds. Um, Sometimes not playing unless you think you can
That's right.
add to the sound spectrum. Um, I was lucky enough to play in a big gig on New Year's Eve with some well-known people.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so Mick and I played in it was a recreation of Countdown, the old ABC TV show.
Yeah.
So a lot of synth and a lot of 80s. Um, uh, there were probably I don't know, 10, 11, 12 musicians that were subbing on and off stage. A lot of people that played in the actual countdown.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, organised by Zoltan John Budai, who had a stint with the Mentals and other bands. We played with Richard Harvey from the Divinyls,
Wow.
Jeff Duff, and a number of other musicians who are way more accomplished than myself. So it's a very steep learning curve, trying to know when to play, when to double up with the guitars,
That's
when
right.
not to, when to pretend to play, and how to read off charts. Interestingly, in my gigging life now, we very rarely use charts.
Yeah.
And we tend to go with the flow, which is odd for a classically trained player.
Yes.
But I actually love it
Yeah, it's
because,
great.
yeah, I actually love having the freedom to be just listening to the band and going with the flow. And if a solo goes a little bit longer, if we don't do the key change straight away or whatever, it can happen,
That's right.
which is quite liberating.
But I mean, you raised good points here about just being that New Year's Eve gig as far as subbing in with other people, but knowing when or not to play. So I mean, people tend to perceive with 80s stuff that it is absolutely soaked in keyboards, but it tends to be very specific. Yeah, that there are songs like Jump like Van Halen and stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, you can't escape that keyboard.
Exactly.
And a bit like Riders in the Storm. Well, Riders in the Storm is more complex by a long shot compared to the Jump keyboard riff. But as you're saying about feeling stress, it's because you started off. There's a lot of stress there because everyone knows what it is, and just one bum finger and it suddenly stands out that you've stuffed it up.
Exactly. But you do a fine job of it, David, I must say.
Probably just as an anecdote, and this is more for your amusement, Sandy, but partly for our listeners. In recent weeks, the guitar player in my band and I, well, it was his idea, said, look, I want to play Jump, but in the middle, there's that awful, when I say awful, it's just we haven't had time to learn it, that bit in the middle that gets relatively complex. And both for guitar, keyboards, drums, it's just a different time, not time signature, but different rhythm and so on. So rather than doing that initially, we're just playing the first two verses of Jump and then going into another Van Halen song. I think it's Talking About Love, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at also mashing Panama in there somehow in that middle bit.
Awesome.
But, so anyway, he suggested that, sent through a cut together version of it to give an example. We didn't get a chance to practice it. We did sound check at this particular gig a few weeks back, and we just had a quick play through it with the bass player, and it sounded okay. Our singer and drummer hadn't had a chance to learn it yet. Anyway, we're playing this gig this night. Went really well. They asked us to play basically an extra set. We're running out of songs to some extent. We're playing Lonely Boy by the Black Keys, and I'm sitting there going, well, this is the one song I have control over. So this is for our listeners in particular who know this feeling where, usually I'm following. I'm not usually starting a lot of stuff, or if it is, it'll be a ballad with a bit of piano and stuff where everyone's just coming in. And I thought, should I surprise these guys? Everyone in the audience is drunk. It's towards the end of the night, and it's actually been captured on video, and I love watching it. And essentially, we finished Lonely Boy. I quickly switched over the sound to Jump that I already had preset, and I just launched into it. And basically, the other four people in the band, nearly synchronized, all turned round to me and look at me as if to go, "What the hell are you doing?" And it's like, I've started it now. You've got no choice. Like the train is off down the track. This is it. And
exactly.
look, they did a great job. I mean, it was far from perfect, but it went really, really well. And then we played it again on Friday night, as you saw, and it
Yes.
was like it's okay. It's still got a way to go, but I just love, yeah, as you know, as a keyboard player, you don't have that control usually, so it's nice to be able to exert it just once.
As long as you nail that riff, Dave.
Oh, that's right.
How,
If you don't know, that would have been a train wreck. That would
how
have
could
been
you not love it?
disastrous. So anyway, sorry, taking us off track, but yeah, that '80s point is a great one, and I think it's fair to say your band Brazen Lies, you do a great way of using the keyboards when you need to. You've heard me go on about this before, but I mean, I love your version of Boys of Summer, which we're going to get onto Desert Island Discs in a moment, but for me, if it were Desert Island singles, that would probably be one of the greatest songs of the '80s.
Yes,
Um,
absolute iconic song. Very popular, always goes off.
Yeah, that's right. And it's relatively subtle with its keyboards, and you're quite right.
Yeah,
It's not about being over the top.
no, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And so, well, we might as well jump into Desert Island Discs. So our guests find this stressful, but they usually come up with 5 pretty interesting ones. So what are 5 albums, if you could only have 5, what would
Yeah,
they be?
right. Yeah, I find this very difficult because I could easily take 50
Yeah,
or
that's right.
500. Narrowing it down, hard to go past Dark Side of the Moon, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
And look, we play a track from Dark Side of the Moon, or a couple of tracks in the Brazen Lies, and I love it, and I love listening to the album. It's
yeah,
a groundbreaking album. It's been I think I couldn't be without it. Um, I know not everyone loves it. Sometimes the kids screw up their faces when I put it on, but
no, it's
it's too
great.
bad. Okay, Dark Side of the Moon, Dire Straits, probably Making Movies would be my
Yeah,
Dire Straits album. We'll play some songs from Making Movies as well, but I love Mark Knopfler's phrasing.
yeah,
I love the he uses a lot of keyboards as well. Tunnel of Love is
yeah.
it's one of the tracks in there that
Incredible
I
song.
love. Yeah, and I'd probably take a few Oz rock 80s.
Yeah.
My favourite is Stone Age Romeos, Hoodoo
Yeah, Hoodoo
Gurus.
Gurus. Now,
Yeah,
I do want to stop there. This is again for our international listeners, and some of our US listeners will absolutely know who Hoodoo Gurus are because they've had
mm,
a degree of success. And I know they have a tour coming up there this year, and I think they've sold out a few of the gigs already and still have a lot more on sale. But
mhm.
yeah, they're just a world class band, those guys. If you
Well,
haven't heard them, have a listen.
absolutely, yeah. A lot of energy,
Yeah,
great songs, and that's my favourite, probably Stone Age Romeos.
yeah,
But check out their other albums as well. They've got a lot of great albums. Mars Needs Guitars.
yeah,
There's a lot of them that are also great. What else? Another Oz rock classic, probably the Divinyls,
yeah.
Desperate. Yeah.
So, mate,
And
another big claim here. Chrissy Amphlett is the best rock front woman in history. There's a big claim, or at least in
isn't
In
she?
Australian history.
Isn't she?
Yeah,
And the attitude
yeah.
and her vocals, fantastic. Really, something that really touched me in the 80s. Great to see a chick up there rocking.
Yeah. Did you
And
get a chance to see her live?
I did,
Yeah,
actually.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Back in the 80s, actually.
Oh, even better.
Um, yeah, late 80s, probably.
Yeah, well,
um,
it's probably the same tour I did. It was very late 80s. It was about 89.
yes, yeah. It would have
Yeah,
been the same tour. Yeah. Snuck into the Herdsman Hotel back in Western Australia. Pushed my way to the front and
yeah.
watched them rock it out.
And did you
Fantastic.
find you had and I'm not going to go into details of the rumours, but there are all these horrific rumours about the things Chrissy was going to do on stage when she got there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously none of
Didn't
that
see it.
happened, but you just heard all these stories. You go, oh my God, surely she's not going to do that. And obviously she
Well,
didn't. She was a class act. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So up to 5. I'd have to choose a Doors album, of
Yeah.
course, being a Doors band. um, and it's a tough choice.
Mm.
I like two of their albums a lot. Probably their self-titled album, the first breakthrough album, with Light My Fire on it. The introduction of that classic Doors sound, that organ sound, having a rock band that made it so big. That was all about the keyboards. It was just amazing. Right. Real iconic sound. Also, LA Woman is one of my favourites. Yeah, which is their last studio album, where they revisited their roots somewhat, some bluesy songs, introduced a B3, very interesting album, and one that we're talking about recreating next year on the 50th anniversary. So, I'd choose one of those as well.
Good picks. And obviously, what's coming up for you? I think I now know what's coming up for you in the next year by what you've just said. But so this year, just a lot of busy gigging with both bands and continue to do what you do.
Yeah, that's right. Keep getting the music out there. The Brazen Lies is our fun band. It's our pub band, and it's always fun. It's always different. The Doors is we take that a lot more seriously in some respects. Not that we don't take the Brazen Lies seriously, but we try to be a lot more faithful.
About it,
a bit more purist, a bit more faithful and respectful to what they produced. And we'll be touring that interstate this year. So all the information is always on our Facebook page and website, of course.
But, and we'll absolutely link. We're going to link to in the show notes, obviously, the website, but also there's some great videos on YouTube that I'm assuming you guys had them done as far as Riders on the Storm and a couple of others at, I assume that was at Lizottes or wherever.
Yeah, we've got a few up. I think we had a big filming session at Lizottes and one at the Brass Monkey too in Cronulla. But we throw videos up onto our YouTube channel from time to time. I think there might be a couple up there from the Soft Parade tour as well, because we actually got the string and horn section up to play encore with us too, which was a lot of fun.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Sam. I can't thank you enough. And it's great to get an insight into, like I said, one of the most iconic bands and eras. It's certainly something I wouldn't be attempting to take on, and you guys do a great job. I know there's a few Doors bands around the world, but you're absolutely up there with the best of them. So,
thank you very much, and thanks for having me, Dave.
And there we have it. A huge thanks again to Sandy for taking part. It was really great to talk with her, and as you can hear, she's one hell of a player and a great person to boot. So the Keyboard Players will be back again in a fortnight or so, but just a reminder that we love to hear from you, and you can keep in touch via a few means. Our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com, and we're on Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles, or on Twitter at the Keyboard CHR1. If you like good old-fashioned email, then do drop us a line at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. And that includes if you have any suggestions for people you would like to see interviewed on the show. We're always up for those suggestions. So we'll definitely be back in a fortnight, and thank you for listening, and hope to see you back then.